Okay, so Paul and Silas have just left Philippi, and there's a tiny little church that has been started there. And in the book of Acts, all of a sudden the narrative goes from first person to third person, which lets us know that lets us maybe consider that Luke stayed in Philippi. And that would kind of make sense. If he's got a brand new church with just a few people, he would need somebody to stay there and help get that church established. And that's just what a lot of the commentators say. And you notice when it goes from we did this to they did that, then you think that, okay, the person who's writing it is no longer involved personally in the story at that moment. And do you remember how difficult and painful and beat up and scourged and messed up Paul and Silas are? Okay, so it's a 100-mile walk to Thessalonica. And if my legs have been in stocks like that, I don't know. For those of you who don't remember, they designed their stocks to separate their legs to the point of cramping and almost dislocation. So when they were sitting in their stocks, the cute little pictures that the kids have is that they're sitting straight up and their legs are ahead and their stocks are over their feet, and maybe they've got chains on their wrists, but it's way more torturous than that. So to have them get up and walk to Thessalonica is quite something, isn't it? A lot of people that I read said that maybe they got rides on horses. But even still, if my hips had been all messed up like that, I don't know if I'd rather walk or ride a horse, either one. Right? So anyway, they go there. I only gave you part of the map because the map is real big and it takes up a lot of space on the page, and we're only in this part of the map on today's journey. So they are right up here in Philippi, and they're going to go over here to Thessalonica. And Thessalonica is what they call a free city, which means that in Rome, they got to elect their own officials. Just giving you some background on the city. There's a population of about 200,000, they guess, which is a pretty darn big city. And it's mostly Greek. There is a Jewish community there because there is a synagogue there. And so, and you know, Paul's pattern is always to go to the synagogue first. And it's really neat. In Romans chapter 9, this isn't in there, it's just thinking of it. Paul is so burdened for his own people that he says to God, I would give up my salvation for them. Now, I love a lot of people, but I don't know that I would go to hell for them to get them to go to heaven. I'm just telling you, I'm not quite as good as Paul yet, you know? I'm just saying, that is a big statement. That's how much he loves his Jewish people, and he always goes to them first. And I still think that's amazing, since for the vast majority of time, he gets huge rejection from the people he loves so much. He's always... Remember what happened in Antioch Pisidia when they started to, and then they go on to, and they follow him around from the to the cities through Galatia, trying to stir up the crowd, and that's why he was even stoned, because the Jewish people kept following him around. So, and still he loves his people like that. That's a lesson to learn against people who reject us, you know? That's just a cool example there. So he goes there and he preaches. We're in chapter 17 at the very beginning of the book of Acts, and he preaches for 3 Sabbaths in the synagogue. That's pretty good, sort of. They listen to him for 3 times. A bunch of people start believing, and he has to reason with them. His train of thought is, first thing I got to do is I got to let my Jewish people know that in the Old Testament, it tells us Messiah has to die. They bypassed that. They allegorized that. They thought differently. If they read Isaiah 53, they go, oh, that's sort of relating to the nation as a whole, and da-da-da-da-da. We've had all these hard times, and that's what the hard times there are. And he has to straighten that thought process out. That Messiah really does have to die. And then after he gets their attention on that one, see, he can do that by going through the scriptures. So he goes to Jewish people, he's going to take their frame of reference, he's going to go through the scriptures. Then he can prove that Jesus is that person. So that's his pattern. And as soon as he does that, then of course he gets the rejection, and they get all up, and the same exact thing happens in Thessalonica, that happened in Antioch, Pisidia, that happened all through Galatia, and all these, in Iconium, and in all these different places, okay? So that's what happened there, and of course they start a riot. Jewish leaders there get very jealous because a lot of the God-fearing ones who are Greeks, who joined their synagogue, believed, which means all of a sudden you've got all these people coming to synagogue for this, and they never came for us. You know, you can see the jealousy working out here, and you can also see that they're losing, quote, quote, their following, which probably has to do with their financials and their donations. So there's a riot, they're not pleased, and they got to get rid of Paul. So they start this riot, and then they blame the riot on Paul. And the city officials come in, and it's a big to-do, and somehow or another, doesn't tell us exactly how, but somehow in this story, Paul and Silas, and Timothy's not mentioned yet, so maybe Timothy is back in Philippi he's going to be in the story in a little bit, but at the moment he's not mentioned, so he might be back in Philippi with Luke, or he's just not mentioned. I don't know which one, but they said that they kind of got Paul and Silas out of there, and they weren't around, and so they had started maybe, or they were either staying with a guy named Jason, or maybe they had started a little church in Jason's home. Jason's home's probably pretty big. And so the police, the magistrates, swarm Jason's home. They're looking for Paul and Silas. They can't find him, so they arrest Jason. And then they take him out, and then I don't know if they keep him overnight. I don't know if they have a fair trial. I don't know, whatever. But he has to pay bond to get out of jail. So, and I don't know if I can't imagine that was small. So he has to pay. And here's this guy. I mean, he's been a believer maybe 3 weeks. Maybe 3 weeks. And let's just put it in American terms. Okay, it's a $10,000 fine to get you out of jail, and that's probably pretty low. It's a $10,000 fine to get you out of jail and to protect these guys. And he goes, okay, I'll pay it. That's something, isn't it? I was like thinking about just the stories that kind of just fly by, and the great things that these guys have done, and show the demonstration of their faith. So they sneak Paul out by night, and we're down to, let's see. Oh, I was going to tell you that when it described the opposition, and that they were wicked men in the city. Okay, in Greek, there's 2 words for bad, or there might be more words for bad. There's 2 words I know for bad. There's kakos, that's bad. And that's what it is, it's bad. But then there's poneros, and poneros is over the top evil. Okay, so kakos is okay, the milk is kakos. It's gone bad, right? The kid was kakos because he's been ornery all day. That doesn't make him poneros, right? These men are described as poneros, and what they do is they run through the city and they find as many degenerate guys that they can, or evil guys that they can, or guys who are swindling people that they can, and they start the riot with that. And I'm thinking, okay, how low do the Jewish leaders have to stoop, you know? And then here you see, by comparison, Jason, who pays the fine just to get Paul and Silas out safely. So it's quite the story there. So, yeah, Paul is charged with turning the world upside down. Well, actually, it's true. It's a true accusation. He has turned the world upside down. To them, that meant flouting Caesar's authority, and that they are claiming that there is a new authority, a new king. So they're trying to figure out a way to word it so it's illegal Roman style. You see, they can't just say, they can't take them to the Roman authorities and say, we don't like the way this guy's teaching in our synagogue. They don't care how they teach in the synagogue. And so they have to rephrase things to be very particular to make it sound like you are breaking a Roman law. So that's what's going on there. Let's see here, what's next? And they seek him out and they take him down to Berea. Berea is about 30 to 45 miles away. It doesn't look like on this map here that the distance between Philippi and Thessalonica is 100 miles and the distance between here and here is 40. It's not, it doesn't look like the scale is right. You know, this one looks, it just doesn't look right. But that's what I read. Yeah. So they go down to there. That's a small, sort of out of the way town. It's not on the main path. It's like the perfect place to hide out, because if the authorities are chasing you, they're going to go down the main roads to see where you're at. And here they're off to the side, you know, in this little town called Berea. And there's a synagogue there, and it's only got about 6,000 people in it. So I don't know, what's the population of Jackson? Is that about?
Close enough.
Something like that. So it'd be like the difference between all of the Sacramento metropolitan area and then Little Jackson. So he brings them up here, and they are more noble. He goes right into the synagogue, and they are more noble, and that's such a cool thing. They receive the word. The word for word is logos. So they receive the logos. I just thought that was just so cool. Logos is the word that's in John 1:1. In the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with God, and the logos was God. So yes, it's just the word for word, but still that just hit me. I liked that. So, and they receive it with great eagerness, and they show, it reminded me of the story of Jesus when the guy sold everything to get the pearl of great price. They want to know this thing. And so they examine the scriptures for themselves. It is such a cool thing, and I wish that there was more than 3 verses in the Bible about Berea. I wish we had a lot about Berea. Berea is the example of all the places where the Jewish people actually received what he was saying. And I want to expand it and say, God, write us a whole bunch more about Berea. But this is what we have. And they examine it, see for themselves. It means to carefully sift through the Old Testament evidence and find out if what Paul is saying is true. Isn't that cool? That is really, really cool. How long do they stay there? It doesn't say. They say that they probably established a church there, and Timothy eventually joins Paul and Silas in Berea, because later on he's going to tell Silas and Timothy to stay in Berea as he takes off. So now we know Timothy is in Berea. So did he go over to Thessalonica and come down, or did he go straight from Philippi and come down? I don't know, but he's there now. And of course, the Jews come tearing down from Thessalonica to stir things up, because they don't want anybody else believing this either, which I wonder how the Jews in Berea responded to that, like, get out of our town, we're doing just fine, but they come down and stir things up to the point where Paul has to get rescued out of there. So he leaves Silas and Timothy in Berea to help establish that church. So you notice that we have someone establishing the church in Philippi, and we have someone establishing the church in Berea, and we have nobody establishing the church in Thessalonica, right? I mean, we've got Jason, but he's been a believer for 3 weeks. So, and yes, he may be the great leader of that church in the future, but at 3 weeks, nobody's ready to take over a church. And so that's what's going on in Thessalonica. We're going to find out that Thessalonica weighs heavy on Paul's heart. Like, okay, I know that Philippi's going to be okay, Luke's there, and Berea's doing all right, but I'm really concerned about Thessalonica. So that's going to weigh heavy. They're going to take Paul and they're going to send him out to the coast, and he's going to take a ship and he's going to land in Athens. Athens is such an interesting city, just telling you. So, but before we do that, I thought we could go over what it's like to be a Berean and see what that is like and what does it mean, what kind of example can we learn from them. So they studied their scriptures. That's what they studied, their scriptures. Oh, I forgot to love you. So, that was my thought. Are we like that? And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, because if you weren't like that, you wouldn't be here. But so I thought I would just go over what are the basic systems of Bible study. And there's probably several. I'm going to tell you about 2. And one is called inductive. And the other one's called, just so that you know, deductive. And both have value, and they're both done a little bit differently. Inductive means that you start with, you go, okay, I would like to learn 1 Thessalonians. So you open to 1 Thessalonians and you start reading. You don't go to 1 Thessalonians thinking, I already know what's in there, blah, 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 blah. You go there, I don't know what's in there, even if you do know what's in there. You go there, I don't know what's in there. I want to read and find out what's in there. So you go there with no preconceived ideas at all. You go there and you read it carefully. So the first part is observation. That's what it's called. And I didn't make up any of these names. This is all somebody's theology somewhere, and a lot of people use it. So observation, and you go through and you read it carefully. And when parts of observation is more than just reading it, when I read it, this is how I've planned out Acts for you guys. Whoops, there goes my new note. Okay. I read it, and then I go through it, I go, oh, okay, what kind of word is that? And so I will go and look up the original. that is easy to do. And I brought my stuff to show you how you can get a free Bible app that has all the stuff, and you just click on the verse and it will take you to the original language. You probably all guys know all of this. And it will give you, like you can touch on, like when I got to the word bad, the word in the previous thing that the men were bad, I touched on that and it said that was poneros and it wasn't kakos, okay? So you can go on there and it will tell you what that word is in Greek. It'll give it to you in English so you don't have to learn the Greek letters. And then it will tell you what the various definitions and how they're used. So sometimes they'll give you, like in English, you can look at the word light or any word and it will have 5 different definitions depending on how you're using it. Okay, we'll do that. So, and then it will give you some explanation on how that was used. So kind of gives you a feel for what he's really talking about. He's not talking about a guy who's just acting bad that day. He was talking about people who were entrenched in being evil. So that's different. It kind of changes your viewpoint. Lots of times, if you take these notes, you'll see that I've put in a Greek word here and there, and it's only because, to me, I felt like, okay, that tells me more than what I thought. So if it says that they pursued them, like there's one that says that they pursued them, well, it was to come after them angrily and actually grab them. I mean, there's emotion involved in it. Or so they opposed them. The word opposed is the word when you stand up next to a guy with a sword and he's coming at you. So it's more than, they're giving me attitude while I'm standing here. We're talking about a word that describes serious opposition. So that gives you a clue of what's going on in the story. So when I do observation, I do a word study. I don't study every word. Are you kidding? It's enough to study a few here and there. Usually it's the verbs that give you more meaning than the nouns, but that's not always true. So I do observation with word study. And the second thing I do under here is I try to get some of the culture. What was it like in that town? Am I in Jerusalem when this stuff happens? Because when stuff happens in Jerusalem, it's entirely different than when stuff happens in Athens. People in Jerusalem are all religious, Jewish, thinking Old Testament. You could take a passage to a person in Jerusalem in Bible times, and they would immediately agree that that passage is truth. The Old Testament. There's no fight over that at all. You take that to Athens, and they stand there and laugh at you because that's not what they believe at all. So where you are makes a huge difference of what's going on into the culture. And it's helpful to kind of know how life goes. It's helpful to know if a woman is in the story. It's helpful to know how much women are allowed to do. Like you read the story of the resurrection, and Mary Magdalene is the very first one to see Jesus alive, right? And she is supposed to go tell them. Did you know that a woman is cannot be considered a witness? Her witness has no value if you're not going to believe. So if you kind of know that, it gives the fact that Jesus would trust his very first appearance to a woman, just, since we're all women, just touches my heart like no end, because logic says he should have spoken to a man first, and he didn't. So that, makes a huge thing in the culture, especially in our culture, where women have gone like over the top on lots of stuff, whereas in reality what we have in Jesus Christ is everything that they're trying to get, as in our culture as far as women go. So that helps a lot with word study, to do some culture in that. And you want to look at how the phrases go. There are idioms. There's phrases, if you want to really get into in-depth, this is how, you guys want to know how I do it? This is how I do it. And so there's probably more I do with this. I figure out maps, I figure out distance, I figure out, did they climb uphill or did they climb downhill? How tired are they? If you've ever tried to do a big event when you're completely exhausted, it makes a huge difference at how it turns out. And so, so that's that. The next thing you do is called interpretation. And interpretation is not, oh, I want it to mean this, so I'm going to interpret it like this. That's not what this means technically under this system. It means, what did the original author mean, and what did the original recipients hear? Okay, so if he's talking to a Jewish audience, think Jewish. If he's talking to the philosophers in Greece, when he's up on Mars Hill and he's talking to the philosophers in Greece, which is what we're going to get to here in a little bit today, we have to think Stoic. We have to think Epicureanism. We have to think like, what are they hearing? And if they're rejecting, why are they rejecting? What's going on? And that kind of thing. And I find this incredibly helpful because if you ever express the gospel to someone else, to tell the gospel to someone else is so helpful to have a clue as to what they're thinking. Is their thinking entirely Darwinism? Is their thinking entirely evolution? You go there and blast them and hit them over the head with Genesis 1:1, they're just going to reject and walk away. That's not, you gotta create, you gotta know your audience, as I would say. And that's really, really helpful. So part of the interpretation is, what did the author mean? And what did the recipients hear? What did it mean to them? So that was one of my purposes in Acts, was to try to develop the story so that you can have a clue how they're hearing it and what's going on, what's being said. So when Paul now explains that the Old Testament, that Messiah needs to die and Jesus is that Messiah, they're going to go back in Berea and go, did he need to die? Where does it say that? How many places does it say that? Oh my goodness, I found it all over the place, and here I've read it all my life and I didn't catch it. And that's what they did. And that's so cool. And then when you say, now let me tell you the story about Jesus, they're going to go, oh yeah, that's it. So that's the whole idea of figuring this out. Now when I say the author, I am meaning, what did Luke mean when he wrote this? But there's an underlying principle that you should all understand, as we know that the Holy Spirit inspired all this. He still used different people's personalities. He let Luke tell it from Luke's personality and his frame of reference. Luke is a historian and a physician. He's going to be detailed. Like, for instance, he's going to come up, I'm jumping ahead, but he's going to come up to Athens and he's going to say, that guy is this particular leader and he is a proconsul. Well, what they're trying to say is there's only different places had different kinds of leadership, and you only have proconsuls in certain ones. So if you name a certain date, a certain person at a certain time, and you say that, he has just nailed the details. So someone at that time reading it would go, oh my goodness, how accurate is this? So Luke proves we read over it and just go, it's another governor of somebody and it's right over there. But Luke is actually proving his accuracy by that. And I'll show it to you when we get to to Corinth. But that's very important to kind of get yourself into that. So now the next one is application. Okay? What's it mean to me? How can I use it? Don't jump to here first. Got to go through the steps. Now there is a warning on this system that I want to tell you. It's really not necessarily easy, but you could go through tons of observation, lots of time. You could go through tons of interpretation and then skip this one and become a Pharisee. Right? That would be, and I'm sure that there are all kinds of biblical theologians in the last 2,000 years who have done that without doing this, without sitting there going, all right, what do I need to do? What did I learn? Did I learn that when I'm talking to an atheist, I don't beat him over the head with Genesis 1:1? Did I learn to find a way in? Let God pray and let God show me a way in? Or if I'm talking to someone who has all kinds of Bible knowledge, but it's all goofed up, like some of those people who come to your door, do you have your way in? Do you know what to say to them? Are you ready? So that's one thing I learned out of this, just from watching Paul's messages to one place full of Jews, one place full of Greeks. What a cool system. So that's one of 1,000. You read through that and you get to find all kinds of different things. Okay, so the other way is deductive study. And in deductive study, you start with a thesis or a topic, and then you go and you find all the places the Bible teaches that topic. Okay, so my example of this one is just the book of Acts, what we've been doing in the book of Acts. My example of this one is that whole long thing I gave you on the study of the Holy Spirit. Okay, that's this one like this, where I went, you hit that Bible app, you put in the word Holy Spirit, you hit the New Testament, and you go through all 529 verses that say this is what the Holy Spirit did, and took me a long time. I don't know, I'm making up a number, but yes, and you can find all your stuff and you find everything out about the Holy Spirit. You would not easily find that reading through Start With, because it's too big, there's too much information and your brain can only absorb so much, and you can only categorize so well, because it's not written in a categorical thing. It's written in a story thing. So this is very, very helpful that way. And Pastor Mark does both ways. There are sometimes he does a topical series and he teaches a topic. There are sometimes, most of the time, he does an inductive series. And that's really, both are very, very good. So this one had a warning. This one has a big warning too. You can start off with a premise and make the Bible prove what you want, whether it's true or false. So that's the warning on this one. And both of them have an application. Okay, so I've used this before, but and I hesitate to say it, but the certain kinds of cults that want to say that Jesus Christ is not God will take that as their thesis and write those verses in such a way that they are proving their thesis. They're not trying to find out what God says about it. They're using it to prove their thesis. So here's my perfect example. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You see that last phrase, the Word was God? In Greek, there's no definite article before God. So they say the Word is a God. So you have just now taken your deductive study and you've used it to prove to yourself something that's wrong. What they don't know is in Greek, the lack of a definite article has a different meaning than the lack of a definite article in English. So in English, when there isn't a definite article, we're talking about a thing. And in Greek, when there isn't a definite article, we're not. We're often talking about an elevated thing. So you got to apply. You cannot apply English rules to another language. You got to apply the right rules to each language. You don't apply English grammar to Spanish. You don't. You apply Spanish grammar to Spanish. But that has gone down as a huge main teaching. So that's the trouble with this one. And that's why this one is usually the preferred system. Okay? So that's there. So I just thought that was really interesting to do it that way. We should, I also thought that we should be able, like Paul, to show people from the Bible that Jesus is the Christ, and we should be able, like the Bereans, to search it out for ourselves. So I just love the story of the Bereans. And we'll pick it up there. He is, by the way, being shipped down to Athens. Athens is a huge different place than Berea. So we'll pick it up there after the break. Okay, so Paul's down in Athens. Athens at that time is no longer the leading city of Greece, or Achaia. Achaia is the bottom half of Greece. What we call Greece, we call all of this Greece today. Achaia is the bottom half, and Macedonia is the upper half. And it used to be that Athens was the seat of government, the seat of everything, the seat of democracy. You guys have probably heard all that from history. We'll go back to your 7th grade and see if you can remember any of that. And which I remember like that much, maybe. And that was several hundred years BC, like when Alexander the Great went through and established all this. That's when Athens became the big city. And it had all the main philosophers there, like Socrates was there, and Plato was there, and Epicurus was there, and I listed quite a few. Zeno was there, and Aristotle. All these people were in Athens. Athens was the city that if you were going to be smart, intelligent, into it, you were in Athens, okay? That was the intellectual city. And on way back at the beginning of this study, I went through some of the philosophies. Well, today is when we're going to use some of those philosophies. And because the Bible actually mentions 2 of them. And so it mentions Epicureanism and the one that is Zeno, which is, hold on, I'll get to it in a second. Anyway, they're all there. It's no longer such a big city. I mean, it's smaller in size. It's no longer the government important city. It's still the intellectual important city. Okay, so the big government and main capital city of the Achaia area has moved over to Corinth. So that's the big city for where is the governor of the territory going to be? Where's the procurator going to be? It's right there. And that's in Corinth. Paul will be there soon, but right now he's in Athens. And he's in Athens by himself, and he's walking through Athens, and there are idols and gods everywhere. Everywhere. So they have 2 kinds of thought in Athens. You basically have all your gods and thoughts in Athens like that, and then you have all your philosophies in Athens. So both kinds are going on all the time. There is a Jewish synagogue in Athens at that time, but I don't know if it's big. I don't know what it didn't talk a whole lot about it other than Paul does go to the synagogue. But at one time, he's walking through the city, and I got to be in Athens, and I got to stand on Mars Hill, and I got to look over the city, and I have a video, but it's just really, I don't know how to do that, but you would love it. But you can stand there, and I took a panoramic of this huge city, and it was like massive buildings as far as you could see. It was like 1 million people. It was just huge, 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 huge city. It's not that big now, but it was fun to stand up there. And as you look around, you go, that hill has a temple, that hill has a temple, that they're just everywhere. And then you could stand there and also turn right over there, and you could see the Acropolis with Parthenon on it, and it has several temples on top of that hill, along with a huge stadium, amphitheater stadium. So it was quite, so as I get to this story, I feel like I'm in the story, because I remember being right there. So it was so cool. So anyway, he's walking through the streets, and I got to walk through the streets, and the marketplace is called the Agora. That's the Greek name for marketplace. And he's walking through, and I'll tell you what, they have the best dark chocolate and gelato in the whole world in that Greek marketplace, in that Greek Agora. If you ever go there, my daughter has tried to buy me something that will match that, and go, okay, that's good, but nothing matches that one. So that was pretty fun. And so we got to climb up there, and but as Paul's walking through, all he sees, it was estimated that they have something like, I don't know, something like 30,000 gods. And I don't know if that's a true estimation or not, but there's that many idols everywhere, right? And so he's walking through, and he's by himself because Timothy and Silas are up in Berea, and Luke may be still in Philippi. So he's by himself, and he's walking through, and all he sees is that God, and that God, and that God, that God, and you can just feel it. I mean, for someone who thinks like Paul, evangelizes like Paul, he's walking through, and he finds this, and this is actually God's help. He finds this one that says, to the unknown God. Like they want to cover all their bases, right? If they got a God of rain, a God of sun, a God of fire, a God of this and that, home, family, fight, war, protection, et cetera, find them all. But they might have missed one. So they have an idol, a statue with a thing to the unknown God. And Paul picks up on that. And so he's a nobody. I mean, nobody knows him in Athens. So he goes to the synagogue, he speaks there. It doesn't say that he got a great response or yes or no. But then during the week, he goes out into the agora and he just speaks to whoever's there. And it says that, and I thought, yeah, it says whoever's there. This is all divine connections that God makes, because there's never a just whoever's there, you know. So, but if he's talking to the poor people, he's talking to the poor people. If he's talking to somebody who worships Athena, he's talking to someone who worships Athena. If he's talking to, and as he's talking, they have some of these philosophers walk by and they hear this crazy talk. And one of the things in Athens was they loved to hear all the new ideas. I was trying to think of a place in America where just if you had a new idea or a new plan you would go there and tell them, and everybody. I didn't figure it out, but they loved to hear all the new ideas, and so they said, we want to listen to this idle babbler. We want to find out what he's saying. And so it just meant that he was talking nonsense, and he had mentioned the resurrection, and you have to realize that most of the philosophers did not believe in that at all. So like Epicureanism is like the beginning of Darwinism, because somewhere in that philosophy, because he's going to talk to some Epicureans, I might not be saying it right, but Epicureanism guys, they kind of believe that somewhere there was this explosion of something, and we got particles, and those particles became, and I'm thinking, Darwin copied you, you know, but, and they believe that the whole world came from that, and so there's not really much purpose, there's not, there's no life after death. If you got this thing, there's all this stuff on it, and you can read all the different things. They were atheists, they denied God's existence, there's no life after death. Everything happens by chance. That only makes sense if that's how you believe it all began. They are materialistic. Pleasure is their highest virtue, but it's pleasure without consequences. So you don't want to eat so much cake that you are sick at your stomach for the next 3 days, because that's not pleasure. Okay, so pleasure without consequences. So they did not believe in, getting horribly drunk and throwing up and stuff like that. It was pleasure without consequences. But there was, you had to have no pain. They were existentialism, you might say, is what is comparison to today. And man determines his own destiny and purpose. He can determine his own purpose. He can determine his own truth. He can determine anything he wants in this godless world. Now, that just sounds so much out there right now.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, yeah.
This guy who was from 300 something or 400 BC, so it's 2,400 years ago or whatever, it just sounds exactly like what's going on now. Okay, so these guys come to Paul and say, we want to hear what you got to say. It sounds like babble. You are going to entertain us today. And they're not coming to him and go, oh, I got to hear this. They're not doing that. They're going, we need some entertainment. This sounds funny. What are you going to tell us? Come on, we're up for something new. We've heard the same old thing too long. We want some entertainment up on Mars Hill. All right. The other guys who are in the group are the Stoics. The Stoics are more pantheistic, meaning they believe in a lot of gods. God is a cosmic force, not a person. Everything is governed by fate. There is no afterlife. They gave God many names, and one of those names was Logos. And John takes that and turns that around later in when he writes the book of John. That'll be like something we'll cover in the fall, because I'm jumping ahead in the story, and because that's later on in the book of when John writes his stuff. But there's, they called God reason, they called God nature, they called God providence, they called God a spirit, but they did not call God a person. They did not consider him as a person you could have any interaction with. When you call God nature, all I'm thinking of, our culture calls God nature. We just call him Mother Nature. It's all this, right? Their idea, the highest good was to follow reason, just be logical, and virtue is its own reward, and there is no reward. Vice is its own punishment. You just stay out of both. You are supposed to, if you are a Stoic, you are supposed to suppress all your emotions. You are not supposed to get excited. You are not supposed to be depressed. You are not supposed to be happy. You are not supposed to be sad. You are emotionless. There is no joy and there is no grief. And if that's life, then something happens. Are you excited about rushing to help somebody in a crisis? No. There's no reason for it. So you just move on. So that was them. Okay? All right, this is Paul's audience. How fun. You know, and so they want to hear you, so they pull him up on the Areopagus. I don't say this quite well. The word's in here in, where are we at here, like 22, 23. And he starts off, and that is a big, it's just, right now, it's just ruins. Okay, so it's a big, like, flat hill, and over here you can see the Parthenon. I don't know if I spelled that right. And then over here in the distance, you see a temple, and the temple, these are all on different hills around. You see it, and then this is a place where right now it's just a rocky mess, but it would have been a place with chairs and like an outdoor stadium or like an outdoor circle for meeting places where you hear people speak. Okay, so he goes in there, and it's, you got to climb the hill to get there. Just telling you, just climb the hill to get there. And it was pretty fun. So that's a pretty lousy picture, but you got it. So he goes up there, and they want to hear what the idol battler's going to say, idol rattler's going to say, and Paul starts off with about the strange deities. And the word for deities is demonion, which is the word for demons. So their word for idols was demon. Isn't that interesting? Those strange deities are called demonion. So sometimes looking up words goes, oh, you know, so like when I was telling you on this part, you look up some of those words and you go, wow, I don't even know Greek, and I can figure that out. Yeah. That's pretty cool. So he goes up and he goes, and he says, you have all these strange demonions, and you don't know what one of them is, and one of them's called the unknown demonion. He goes, let me tell you who that is. And he starts, and he gives them this message, and and he uses that. And so he is the creator. We'll look at verse 17, around verse 24. He's going to say he's the creator of all this. So all the Epicureanisms go, you mean it didn't just explode out of particles? So he's the creator. He is the ruler and sovereign over all. Wait a minute, I thought it was all fate. See, if you know kind of what they're thinking, then you listen to Paul's, because we read it and it just says, the God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. We go, okay. They're going to go, the God who made the earth, what? There's a creator. And then they're going to, he is Lord of heaven and earth. You mean it's not all fate? It's not all chance? There's a Lord, there's someone in charge. There's responsibility to a Lord. You see how he's really laying this deep? He is the giver of all good gifts. Oh my goodness, they didn't think that. They thought it was all chance. Something happened good? Hi. Something happened bad? Hello. He made all the races and nations. He controls world history. He's going to say this. He's going to say, nor is he served by human hands as though as he needed anything, since he himself gives to all people life and breath and all things. So he gives all those good things. And then he says, and he made from one man every nation of mankind who live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and boundaries and of their habitation. He just told them God controls history. Pretty cool, huh? All right, they're listening, because now he's not idle babbling anymore. Now he has, without attacking, He has just nailed all their main points of their belief system. I go, Paul, you are a genius because you're doing this in such a sweet, nice way. They don't even know. And they're now very interested. I wish I could do that, but so, and he is not hard to find. Look at verses 27 through 28. That they would seek him if perhaps they might look for him and find him, although he's not far from any of us. So he said, God wants you to find him. So that's pretty cool. And then he goes, for in him we live and move and exist. And even some of your own poets have said that. So do you see that Paul is acquainted with their information? Because one of their poets must have said, we are all his children. So it's really cool because he's talking to Greeks. He's not talking to Jews. If he was talking to Jews, he'd quote the Old Testament. But he's not talking to Greeks. So he pulls something out of their information. There's got to be one true statement somewhere in their information. He pulls that out and uses that. Smart guy. Okay? Really cool. And therefore he is, and at this point, those Greeks cannot claim ignorance. They now know there's something out there for them. So he has removed anything that was related to them being able to say, I never knew any of this, because now they do. And he goes, this God is self-existent. Let's look at 30 and 31. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to all men, all people everywhere, that they should repent. This is his first big thing. Now he nails them with something. You are going to need to repent, because if he is God, and if he is the creator, and if he is over everything, and if he is controlling history, and he is Lord, you answer to him. Ooh, you mean it's not just nothing? Just let me do what I want? As long as it doesn't hurt me? Now he's saying, you're going to answer to him, so you need to repent. Okay, now they're really listening. They're on the edge of their seats. And there's a standard of righteousness, because judgment is coming. Because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness. Oh, that's a hard one. Because that means we all stand in front of him. If you were talking to an unbeliever, and you were talking to someone who is, let's say, an atheist, or someone who thinks like this, if you can gently bring them to the point where, do you realize you're going to have to stand be judged? Then they have to deal with it. They either have to say, I don't believe any of that, and throw it away, which means they're not ignorant, or they're going to have to deal with it. Which is really cool. Someday, I hope I get this opportunity to speak to and effectively speak to an atheist. I know some, and I haven't had the opportunity yet, but someday I wish, and if I do, it has to actually be under conditions where they're sitting and listening. Like these guys asked him to talk, so they're sitting and listening. They're going, tell me what your story is, what's going on. And every time I'm around the atheists I know, they don't want to hear anything I have to say, and they're not listening, and they avoid talking to me, basically. So I haven't been given the opportunity yet. But I love learning at least an idea of how to do it. So he takes them to them, and he goes, and he takes them to that point, and then he says, through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead. Okay, if this is the appointed judge, then the proof is he has power over death. And if he has power over death, then wait a minute. There is power over death. And there is life after death. And they get the point. It's like that. Now, when they heard of the resurrection from the dead, see, this is completely rejected on their viewpoint, right? When they heard the resurrection from the dead, they began to sneer. All right, you could look up sneer. I bet you it's a little bit more than right? But others said, hey, we'll hear from you again. Now, so Paul leaves, and he goes out of their midst, but some men joined him, some believed, among whom was Dionysius the it's so hard for me to say a word that has 5,000 vowels in it. Areopagite, which means he was one of the main people who sat in that place. Okay, so he was that was his group, because it's the the name of the place is that, okay? All right, yes, yes. Yeah, good luck with that. Okay. And there was a woman named Damaris and others. So we have a few that believe. Now it turns out that Luke does not tell us any more about Paul in Athens. Does he go back and talk to them again like they asked? Or were they just saying, come tell us more sometime? Was it a non-responsive or was there another time and it's just not recorded? Don't know. But there's no recording of anything else going on. And we also have no future statement of any church established in Athens. So I do not know. I do know that God presented the gospel to them and they had the chance to believe. And it was the common people down in the Agora, and it was the people who thought they were so smart up there on Mars Hill, and the whole group, and the Jewish people. So everybody there got a chance, and not everybody responds. And God gave them free will. So Paul leaves. Somewhere while they're there, I have my memory correct, and you never know, Silas and Timothy rejoin him, and they come down from Berea and they join him. And at this point, Paul is so still concerned about Thessalonica that he sends Timothy back to Thessalonica. So they join him. They're down here in Athens, and he goes, "You got to get back there. You got to get back there. You got to teach them. You got to help that church. I'm so worried about them. They were, they've only had 3 weeks worth of information, and all that's gone down. We've got Jason, and that's it. So how are they doing? We need someone there." So he sends Timothy back to Thessalonica, and it appears as though he sends Silas somewhere too, because Silas is missing in the next part of the story. So maybe he goes to Berea, maybe there was someplace else on the way that isn't mentioned, but I think both of them, he sends them off to establish these new Christians and help them most of these people are not Jewish. Most of these people don't have the Old Testament. Most of these people have 3 weeks worth of teaching. Can you just picture yourself? 3 weeks worth of teaching, and then all the pastors leave. Okay. So you can see why Paul is so concerned. So he sends Timothy back. And in the meantime, then he goes, it says at the beginning of chapter 18 of Acts, after these things, he left Athens and goes to Corinth. So you don't really see that there's a lot of response in Athens. We don't really see that. He goes to Corinth, which is about 50 miles due west, and there's a canal there now. It wasn't there then. It's got 2 main ports. One is right there, and one is right there. And that's a land bridge, so to speak, and what they would do is the ships would go from one to the other, and they had this, imagine a big ship. okay, like a cargo ship. And then they wanted to get that ship across that isthmus. And so they had a raised platform of some sort that had ropes and pulleys, and they had the slaves pull the ship 30 miles across. And while they were pulling the ship the 30 miles across, the sailors went and partied in Corinth. Corinth is the party city of the Roman Empire. Corinth is big time, serious party city of the Roman Empire. And they have right now there's this huge ruins there. It's one of the biggest sets of ruins there are that I saw. And they said only maybe 20% of it has been uncovered. And in there we found the temple to Apollo, which is still standing. And up on the hill behind it, there's a high hill up there, and it's where they have the garrison so they can protect the city. But up there also is the temple of, I want to say Aphrodite or Diana or somebody. And its worship is through prostitution, both male and female. And the thought was that as evening set, the priests and priestesses came down by 1,000 a night to go over the city and worship. Okay? In Roman talk, if you were Roman talk and you wanted to say what was the most sinful, degenerate, horrible city in the entire Roman Empire, they described itself as Corinth. So this is where Paul has gone. Now, knowing that, and that he sent his helpers away, you go, would I walk into, I would not, I'm just telling you, I'm not comfortable there, but what courage he has, you know? And in the meantime, he runs into Aquila and Priscilla, who, by the way, just got kicked out of Rome. Remember Claudius? I told you about how he had the edict to get all the Jews out of Rome. Okay, well, in those times, a Christian and a Jew is the same thing. They're not identifying the difference yet. And so there's this thing going on. It's not the first time that Christians and the Jews have been thrown out of Rome. I found at least 3 times they were thrown out of Rome, up to 30, 40,000 of them at a time when they are evicted out of there. And then as soon as that emperor dies, they all move back in again, and that will happen again. But right now, Priscilla and Aquila were, it says they're from Pontus. Pontus is over here. And somehow or another, they had moved to Rome. And now they're kicked out and they come to Corinth. Now, it doesn't tell us if they believed in Rome. It doesn't tell, maybe they were believers from Pentecost, because it tells us that there were people from Pontus in Pentecost. Go look back at Acts 2, you'll see that. So maybe they believed there, went home, and then migrated over to Rome. Not sure. Maybe they believed from the Christians in Rome. Maybe they believed after they got to Corinth and they ran into Paul. Okay? But whatever, by the time we get into the story of what's going on in Corinth, Aquila and Priscilla are very strong believers. And they happen to be tent makers. If you go look up tent makers, you'll find that it may also be leather workers. That makes sense. So it may be that they're not just making tents, maybe a whole bigger enterprise than just that. So that's where they are doing that. And it's a very wealthy city. It's got a lot of commerce because it has the 2 big ports. It's also the 2nd largest city in the empire for sports. And they have every 2nd year, they have an Olympics, so to speak. And so there's tons of entertainment. There's tons of theater work. It's not necessarily very PG-13. It's pretty much like that all over. And there in the middle of this, in the Agora, which is the shopping center, is a tent maker shop. And Paul's walking through and he sees a tent maker shop. He goes in and applies for a job.
He does what?
He applies for a job.
Oh.
Oh, do you need any help working in a tent maker? Oh, sure, we could use you. Oh, my name is Paul. My name is Aquila. My name is Priscilla. All right, so they're cool. Now they're nice and all things are going great. And he is going to the synagogue. There's a synagogue there, and which means there's Jewish people there. And he teaches there. And then after a while, Timothy comes back. And he's got really good news about Thessalonica. And you could just see Timothy bouncing through the door and telling Paul, and Paul just going so excited to hear that they are faithful, that they are growing, that they are so concerned about Paul because they had to kick him out at the last second under night so that he could get there safely. Is he okay? What's going on? And on and on and on. And Silas arrives too. And by the way, a gift arrives. The gift is such, it might have come from Philippi, it might have come from Thessalonica, but the gift is such that Paul can stop working and he can now evangelize the city. So he is doing all of that, and of course, the synagogue. The same thing. And he teaches there, and he's going to do the same thing, and he's going to be, let's see, where am I at here? And, okay, they resist, they blaspheme. Paul is going to shake out his garments. To them, that means when they left the city that had any Greeks or Gentiles in, they would take and shake out the dust of the Gentiles out of their clothes when they left. What Paul is doing is he's shaking out the dust of the Jews. And that means a lot. All we see is that he shook out his clothes. Okay, so he shakes, and then he goes, I am clean, and I'm going to the Gentiles. To them, they were clean, and the others were not. This is ceremonial cleanliness. Remember all the stories with Jesus in the ceremonial cleanliness? This is very, very an indictment on them from Paul. When he says, I am clean, I am going to that, and your blood is on your head. Your responsibility is now on your head. And they got the message, because it makes them mad. Not just a little bit mad, really mad. So it turns out one of the guys believed. The leader of the synagogue, there's a difference between the rabbi of the synagogue and the leader of the synagogue. The leader of the synagogue is in charge of the building. He's got to make sure the right scrolls are there on Saturday morning, on Sabbath morning. He's got to make sure everything's clean. He's in charge of the synagogue and all that. That doesn't mean he's the rabbi teaching, but and his name is, I want to say Sosthenes, but I don't think so. Crispus. Crispus believes, this is a huge problem to the Jewish people if the leader of their synagogue believes. And so there's all this to do, and another guy believes, and so Paul says, okay, I'm done with you, I'm going to the Gentiles, and he goes, and guess where he goes? Next door. Next door, the guy who believes is next door. And you think that, and then all the people are coming, all the Gentiles are coming, all the Greeks are coming, and here's the Jewish people right here, next door. I'm thinking they probably still hear. I'm thinking Paul's got a large voice, you know? And after a while, you guys know what happens. It keeps going on, and a bunch of these people believe. We're going to find out that some of these people begins their story in the letter of 1 Corinthians. It carries over, and then one night, it's all fine. Paul has already been beaten. He's already been in stocks. He's already been stoned. He's already been kicked out. How many times? And all of a sudden, Jesus comes to him in the middle of the night and he says, Paul, don't be afraid. I'm like, when is Paul ever afraid? He goes, don't be afraid. Don't leave the town. Was Paul thinking of leaving? Just keep talking. Was he thinking of stop? Was something? So I'm thinking to myself, something is brewing that is scaring Paul. And something was brewing that was scaring Paul. So they comes along, and I'm not sure how much time, but Jesus says, I promise you I will always be with you. I've got people in this city. I've got lots of people in this city. Consider the city. I got lots of people, and you will not be harmed in this city. He's harmed in every city he's in. You will not be harmed in this city. So Paul continues. Next thing you know, we are at the Bema. The Bema is a raised platform in the middle of the agora where all the court takes place. This is like outdoor courtroom. And the main governor of the entire region is sitting up there. His name is Gallio. And there's actually an inscription of him found at this date. He's only in power for like 2 years. So the fact that that date is found in an inscription saying he was in power during that time nails the accuracy of Luke's thing. And it also tells us exactly when Paul was in Corinth. So it's called the inscription of Delphi, if you ever want to look it up. But things like that establish the veracity of God's word. And so he's up there, and the Jewish leaders grab Paul and they bring him in front of the court. Okay, so it's a stone thing, and it's about, I don't know, this high. So I got to stand there. And the top part of it is all set up for all the main chairs or the throne or whatever you call it, and all the things. And the person who's on trial is below on the ground under it, okay? On the big, huge, giant stone thing. This is a big marble thing. So, and in the middle of the area at the bottom, which is right in the center of the agora where everybody's shopping, is a pillar. Okay? Right now the pillar's only about so high because it has been broken down, but there's this big pillar right there. And the point of the pillar is, if you are found guilty of the crime you're being tried for, you are tied to the pillar and you are stripped and whipped. Right there. And there's the pillar. Okay? If you are guilty of a death sentence, you will be either taken out and crucified, or you will be head chopped off, depending on if you are a Roman citizen or not. Okay, so now, imagine yourself being pulled in front of that, and you're standing next to the pillar. And up on the platform is a Roman governor. And the charge being brought against you is you are teaching sedition and to worship the wrong God. That, by the way, is illegal in Roman court. So the Jews have to word it in such a way that the Roman governor will think it's a Roman law he's breaking. And that's what they do. But Gallio is pretty smart, and he's clever, and he sees to it. By the way, his brother is famed Seneca. Okay? His brother is the famous poet Seneca, if you've ever heard of him. And Seneca was Nero's tutor. This shows you how all these things are connected. And since we're running out of time, I'll just jump to the end. Gallio sees through the mess, and he realizes that they are talking about Jewish law of how do you worship God, not a Roman law of how do you worship God. So he throws it out of court. So Paul is not injured, but they grab Sosthenes, which is one of the other Jewish guys. And they tie him to that pole, and they whip him instead. And this is entirely illegal because he wasn't on trial. And Gallio lets it go. But one of the things that happened when Gallio threw the case out of court is he technically, for the next 10 years, since he's such a high-ranking Roman governor, sets the precedent for that. You cannot try these people for presenting the gospel for the next 10 years. And that will stay the case until Nero decides to blame the burning of Rome on the Christians. And when that happens, then that ruling over gets thrown. But for 10 years, they have freedom legally under the guise of Judaism to present this view of Jesus Christ. Because the Romans consider Christianity part of Judaism, and Judaism is legal. Okay? So that happened there. I thought I would end, and I'm almost out of time, with telling you about the Bema that we have to face. So Paul is going to stay there for another year and a half. And during that time, we'll see what goes on during that time next week. And then next week is our last week. And then we will just let Paul stay his year and a half in Corinth while we take the summer off. And you're just going to be there and like that. But the Bema we have to face is we have to face something called the judgment seat of Christ. Have you guys heard of that? That is in the judgment seat of Christ. That is it's in several places, but one of the main places is 2 Corinthians 5:10. And it's described in 1 Corinthians 3, I'm going to say like 11 through 15. And it's in Romans 14, 10
And 12.
10 through 12. Okay. And when you see judgment seat, that is the Greek word bema. Okay, that's why I've been calling it the bema. If you go to the bema in Corinth, in front of it, there's a plaque that says the bema. Okay, it's right there. That's what they call that. And there's a time when we will face Jesus Christ to be evaluated for what we have done with what he gave us in our Christian life. He has caused us to be born again. He has given us his Spirit. He has a plan for us. Did we follow the plan? Did we do it? And it says, like in this one says, do you not know we will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ? That's pretty much what that one says. This one says, oh, do you not know? Everybody has a foundation and they build on it, and some build with gold, silver, and precious stones, and some build with wood, hay, and stuff. We're talking about the same thing. And he goes, and it will all be evaluated by fire. So God takes a torch. I'm picturing whatever I can here. And he throws it at your pile, whatever your pile is. Okay? All that you've done, your whole entire life, everything you did under the power of the Holy Spirit, everything you did under your old sin nature, everything, the whole thing is there. He's going to light it on fire. And what is left is what you get rewarded for. So, you have a tiny bit left. Then you're in heaven with a little reward. Will you be happy? Oh, you betcha. You're in heaven. And heaven is beyond your imagination if you get nothing. But if you are the Apostle Paul, you get huge piles of rewards. And some of those, I have a list of some of these rewards. They're called crowns. You go through Revelation 2 and 3, and you're going to see at the end of each church, it will say, To those who are faithful to the end, they will receive the privilege of eating from the tree of life. I mean, we're talking Eden here. I want to go taste that fruit. Another place it's described as 12 different fruits that rotate throughout the months of the year. I want them all. I did a silly thing with kids one time, and I said, they're going, and so what? I go, maybe pizza's on the tree. So I called it a pizza tree. And I said, maybe it's got chocolate chip cookies on that tree. And now all of a sudden they're excited to eat from the tree. And I did not know this was happening. This was at a big Bible conference somewhere, and I was called in at the very last second to teach this class to these children who, when I did not know up until like 5 minutes before. And so as I'm doing this, the people that I did not know had planned treats for these kids. And you know what they brought in? Pizza and chocolate chip cookies. And the kids just thought I planned it all out. I made that up as I was talking. And pizza and chocolate chip cookies came in for those kids. I will never forget that moment. That was for me. I mean, for them, yes, but that was for me. So there's things like that. And you can go through the list. There's a crown of life. There's a crown of glory. There's a crown of, what's the one that's done in Peter? There's a crown of, anyway, they're all in here. My brain is now on pizza and cookies. So there'll be more rewards. If you are worried that you know somebody that has no rewards, that believed in Jesus Christ, go read verse 15. Because if it says in verse 15 that if it all burns up, then they get to slide in there with that anyway. So that it basically promises heaven for those who fail in their Christian life. Which, since I know people like this, I find that an incredible, I'd rather build the gold, silver, and precious stones, but I love verse 15. It tells me that people I know who believed in Jesus Christ and did not build will be there. So that's very precious to me. Standing in front of that bema, I remember standing next to the pillar and picturing that moment when I'm standing in front of the real bema. And it didn't get to last long because I was on a tour and they give you 5 minutes in every location before they take you to the next, But that's the way Bible tours are. But I still got to have that moment. So we get to hear the guy up there say, that's a well done. And one of those rewards, this hits me in Revelation, is I will take you and I will present you before the Father. Oh my God, and the angels. Can you picture God picking us, Jesus taking us and standing next to us? There's God, there's the angels. He goes, this is my faithful servant. I don't know that I can even handle that, but that would be all in itself right there. Okay. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this story. Thank you that you have the bema for us. Thank you that you've provided that our sins are not going to be evaluated on that bema because they've already been paid for. And we already have your righteousness. Thank you for all these illustrations, how to study your word, how to present it to other people who are responsive, people who are not responsive, how to have courage. Thank you for the promise you gave Paul that you will never, ever, ever leave him. Thank you for all these things. Thank you for your word.
And I ask that you help us to take these lessons and actually apply them so that we do not go through this process of Bible study without getting to the last step. And these things I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.